The winter rescuer. The night we couldn't leave him, it was one of those nights when the cold seems to creep through everything. Every window, every crack in the door, every layer of clothing. My fiancé and I had planned a quiet evening together, a simple dinner at our favorite little restaurant downtown. The kind of cozy place with dim lighting and the faint sound of jazz playing in the background, perfect for escaping the harsh reality of the bitter winter outside. We bundled ourselves up in heavy coats, scarves, and gloves, bracing ourselves for the chill that waited for us just beyond the front door. The sky was a deep, dusky blue as we walked hand in hand through the snow-covered streets. The world felt still, quiet, save for the crunching of snow beneath our feet. A light snowfall had begun, tiny flakes swirling down like confetti, dusting the already blanketed sidewalks. There was something almost peaceful about it, despite the biting cold. We turned the corner onto a less-traveled side street, and that's when we saw him. He was a small, scrappy-looking dog, huddled against the side of a building, curled into a tight ball as if trying to make himself as small as possible. His fur, once probably a light brown or tan, was now matted with dirt and snow, and his thin body shivered violently in the cold. He looked up as we approached, his dark eyes wide with fear and desperation. There was no mistaking it. He was freezing to death. My heart clenched at the sight of him, and without thinking, I stopped in my tracks. My fiancé, noticing my hesitation, followed my gaze and saw the poor creature trembling in the snow. He gave my hand a gentle squeeze, understanding immediately what I was thinking. "We can't leave him," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the sound of the wind. The words were more a plea than a statement. I knew we had plans, but how could we walk away from this? My fiancé nodded without hesitation, his expression softening with compassion. "Of course we can't," he agreed quietly. We knelt down a few feet away from the dog, careful not to startle him. He was so thin, so frail, and his eyes were filled with a mix of fear and pain. It was clear that he had been out in the cold for far too long, abandoned and left to fend for himself. Every bone in his body seemed to tremble as he struggled to stay warm, and the sight of it made my chest tighten with helplessness. "Hey, buddy," I said softly, trying to keep my voice calm and soothing. "It's okay. We're not going to hurt you." The dog watched us warily, his body tense, as if ready to run at any moment. But he didn't have the energy to move. He was too cold, too weak. I could feel the weight of his desperation in the air around us, and it broke my heart. "We need to get him out of here," I said, turning to my fiancé. "He won't survive the night if we leave him." My fiancé nodded again, his face full of concern. "Let's take him home," he said. "We can warm him up and figure out what to do from there." Carefully, I reached out my hand, inching closer to the dog, trying to show him that we meant no harm. His eyes flickered with uncertainty, but he didn't move away. Slowly, I placed my hand on his back, feeling the sharp jut of his ribs beneath his matted fur. He flinched at first, but after a few moments, he relaxed slightly, as if realizing that we were his only hope. Gently, my fiancé and I lifted the dog into our arms, cradling him between us as we hurried back to our apartment. He was so light, so fragile, and I could feel his body trembling against mine as we made our way through the snow. Every step we took seemed to bring a new wave of cold, and I couldn't help but wonder how long he had been out there, alone and freezing. When we finally reached our apartment, we rushed inside, the warmth of the building washing over us like a welcome embrace. We carefully set the dog down on a soft blanket we had spread out on the floor, and I immediately grabbed another blanket to wrap around him, hoping to trap in as much heat as possible. My fiancé grabbed a towel and began to gently dry off the dog's fur, trying to remove the snow and ice that clung to him. The dog shivered uncontrollably, his small body struggling to adjust to the sudden warmth. We turned on a space heater and placed it nearby, hoping it would help speed up the process of warming him up. As we worked to help him, the dog seemed to sense that he was safe, if only for a moment. He looked up at us with those same dark, desperate eyes, but now there was something else in them. A glimmer of hope, perhaps, or maybe just a quiet gratitude for the kindness we had shown him. We stayed by his side for hours, waiting for the trembling to subside, offering him small bits of food and water once he was ready. Slowly, he began to regain some of his strength. His eyes became less fearful, and though he was still weak, there was a subtle change in his demeanor. He knew he was no longer alone. As the night wore on, we settled into the quiet of our apartment, the dog curled up on the blanket between us. My fiancée and I exchanged glances, both of us feeling the same unspoken understanding. This wasn't just a temporary rescue. This little dog, this freezing, abandoned soul, had found his way into our hearts. We couldn't just send him back out into the cold. "I think we need to keep him," I said softly, reaching out to gently stroke the dog's head. My fiancé smiled, his eyes warm with affection. "I was thinking the same thing," he replied. "I think he belongs with us now." We sat there in comfortable silence for a while, the warmth of the space heater filling the room, the soft sound of the dog's breathing lulling us into a peaceful state. The storm outside had intensified, the wind howling against the windows, but inside it was calm. Safe. We had done the right thing. Over the next few days, the dog, whom we decided to name Toby, slowly began to heal. His once matted fur grew soft and shiny with regular baths and grooming. He gained weight, his ribs no longer visible beneath his coat. And most importantly, he started to trust us. He would wag his tail when we came home, nuzzle against us for affection, and follow us around the apartment as if afraid to be alone again. Toby had found his place in our little family, and it was clear that he was here to stay. Every night, as we settled in for bed, Toby would curl up at our feet, his body warm and content, no longer trembling from the cold. And every night, as I watched him drift off to sleep, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude for that fateful night when we couldn't leave him behind. In the end, it wasn't just Toby who had been saved that night. In a way, he had saved us too, reminding us of the power of compassion, of the simple act of helping another being in need. Toby had become a part of our family, not because we had planned it, but because sometimes the most important things in life happen when you least expect them. And as I watched him sleep peacefully, curled up between us, I knew that we had made the right choice. We couldn't leave him, and we never would. Thanks for watching. Share your pet stories with us.